The rain had not stopped for 3 cycles. Mira sat beneath the torn canopy of her emergency shelter, watching water pool in the depression her landing pod had carved into the alien soil. The fabric above her head, designed for arid planets not this perpetual deluge, sagged under the weight of accumulated moisture. Another drop found its way through a seam and splashed against her forehead. She didn't bother wiping it away anymore. The distress beacon blinked faithfully from the pod's half-buried hull, its red pulse barely visible through the curtain of rain. 47 days. That's how long she'd been stranded on this world after the navigation malfunction had torn her scout ship apart in the atmosphere. The beacon's battery would last another 100 days, maybe more. Her supplies would not. Mira pulled her jacket tighter, a futile gesture against the creeping cold, and stared at the tree line. The forest here was wrong in ways her mind still struggled to process. The trees grew in spirals, their bark translucent enough to reveal the luminous sap flowing beneath. During the brief moments when the rain lessened, she could see them pulsing like veins. She'd studied xenobiology for 6 years at the academy. None of it had prepared her for loneliness. Movement at the forest's edge made her tense. Her hand instinctively moved to the plasma cutter at her belt, the only weapon she had left. But the shape that emerged from between the spiral trees wasn't one of the large predators she'd glimpsed during the first week. It was small, no taller than her waist. The creature moved on 4 legs, its body covered in dense fur that shed water like oil-treated cloth. Its face was flat, almost feline, with large eyes that reflected the red beacon light. In its mouth it carried something bulky. Mira remained perfectly still. First contact protocols scrolled through her mind, but they seemed absurd here, alone and drenched in the rain. The creature, a cub, she realized, based on its proportions and uncertain gait, approached slowly. It stopped 3 meters from her shelter and dropped what it carried. A blanket. Not a blanket, Mira corrected herself as she stared. Some kind of woven material, thick and clearly crafted. Intelligent hands had made this. The cub, Talrek, she would later learn his name, made a chittering sound and backed away, not fleeing but maintaining distance. His ears, triangular and mobile, swiveled toward her, waiting. Mira's throat tightened. She rose slowly, hands visible, and approached the gift. The woven material was dry somehow, despite the rain. When she touched it, warmth radiated against her frozen fingers. The fabric was made from fibers she didn't recognize, woven in patterns that seemed to shimmer and shift. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing the cub couldn't understand. But gratitude needed to be expressed. Talrek chittered again, a sound almost like laughter, and disappeared into the forest. The cubs returned the next cycle. This time there were 4 of them, each carrying something. Talrek led them, his bearing more confident now. They deposited their offerings at the edge of her camp, another blanket, a container woven from reeds that held some kind of paste, a bundle of the luminous sapwood that burned without smoke, and something that looked like a crude map etched onto bark. Mira watched from her shelter, wrapped in the first blanket. Its warmth had been the only thing that kept hypothermia at bay during the previous night. She wanted to rush forward, to communicate, to ask the 1,000 questions burning in her mind, but she held back. Let them set the pace. Let them feel safe. The smallest cub, barely larger than a house cat, kept glancing at her with undisguised curiosity. When Mira smiled, the cub's ears shot straight up. Slowly, carefully, Mira stood and bowed. It was a human gesture, but respect was respect. She hoped it translated. Talrek's ears flicked, and he made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. The other cubs responded in kind. Then as one, they retreated into the forest. But before Talrek disappeared, he looked back. His large eyes met hers, and Mira saw something there that transcended species. Recognition. One thinking being acknowledging another. The pattern continued. Every cycle, the cubs came with offerings. Food that her scanner confirmed was digestible. Tools carved from bone and stone. Once they brought a living creature, small and docile, that one of the cubs demonstrated was edible by taking a bite and making exaggerated sounds of satisfaction. Mira laughed for the first time in weeks, the sound startling the cubs but also making them chitter in what she'd begun to recognize as pleasure. She tried to give gifts in return. Her emergency rations were useless to them. She'd seen them spit out a protein bar with comical disgust. but they loved the glow sticks from her survival kit. They wore them around their necks like jewelry, parading through her camp and chittering with pride. The rain never stopped, but Mira no longer felt its cold. On the 83rd day, adult members of Talrek's species finally appeared. They were massive compared to the cubs, nearly 3 meters tall when standing upright. Their leader, a female with silver-streaked fur, studied Mira with ancient, knowing eyes. Mira bowed, as she had with the cubs. The leader made a complex series of sounds and gestures. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and touched the blanket wrapped around Mira's shoulders. The same blanket Talrek had brought cycles ago. Understanding flooded through Mira. The cubs hadn't been bringing random gifts. They'd been testing her, observing, reporting back, and the adults had been watching, waiting to see how this strange creature would respond to their young. Humanity's first lesson in joining the galactic community hadn't come from a formal delegation or a carefully planned mission. It had come from children bringing blankets to a stranger in the rain. The leader gestured toward the forest, an invitation clear in the movement. Mira glanced back at her emergency pod, at the still blinking beacon. Rescue would come eventually. Earth would find her, but she wouldn't be the same person they'd sent. She gathered her meager belongings, wrapped the precious blanket around her shoulders, and followed the adults into the spiral forest. Talrek appeared at her side, chittering happily, his small form bounding through puddles. The rain continued its endless fall. But Mira was no longer alone, and humanity had just learned its most important lesson. Sometimes survival isn't about strength or technology or superior firepower. Sometimes it's about accepting a blanket from a stranger's child and recognizing the kindness for what it is, a bridge between worlds, built by small hands in the endless rain. Behind her, the beacon continued to pulse. When rescue finally arrived, they would find it abandoned, but they would also find something else. The beginning of humanity's first true friendship among the stars, forged not in conference rooms or treaty halls, but in an act of simple, profound compassion from cubs who saw a stranger suffering and chose to help.